Good morning, my name is Stephen Capaldo. It is Thursday, March 10, 2022, so I'm back for another message, and today I'll be talking a little bit more about Ukraine and Russia, and the point that I'd like to emphasize this morning is that the case of Ukraine is not your average Soviet Socialist Republic or former Soviet Socialist Republic. It's not your average Eastern European country, that there are indeed some unique things that are relevant to Ukraine, and they really aren't relevant to all of these other places. And one useful thing might be to say, to talk a little bit about the time when the Soviet Union was disbanded and the deal basically that was made between the Soviet Union and NATO and US. When we'll look back, people look back at this period, there's all this great nostalgia, and I would say bordering on propaganda, that it was, that it was the moment of freedom and people were learning how to breathe free, and, all of this new democracy was happening and this and that. You can go with that, but really what the deal was is you have the Soviet Union, and you had Gorbachev. Mikhail Gorbachev was the head of the Soviet Union, and then you had this other guy in the background, Boris Yeltsin, and he wanted to be president of Russia. He didn't want to be president or head of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. And basically, as I understand it, there was some kind of an arrangement or agreement between Yeltsin and the head of Belarus at the time and the head of Ukraine at the time that they would go ahead and dismantle the Soviet Union. And in return, they would simply ask for NATO not to move its troops closer to the Russian border. So I don't know if it was this great rebirth of freedom. It seems to me it was what they call realpolitik, just really an arrangement that people made. So this was done, and the Russians knew that the West would have a little propaganda victory and this and that, okay. But really the having the Soviet Union, having all of these Soviet Socialist republics and Eastern European countries, it was a drain on the Soviet economy. It was a drain on the economy. So it was just as, we'd like to get rid of this burden on us, and so we'll agree, okay, we'll give them their little propaganda victory. All we ask in return is that they not advance their troops to the Russian border, which NATO promised that they would not do that, but they have done that. And so now that's why Russia is in this position of they seem very stern or very unforgiving about NATO, but the point is that they were told that NATO would not advance its troops to the Russian border, and that was violated. It didn't happen that way. And the idea that Russia is somehow interested in taking back everything that they had, I don't think they want the financial burden of it any more than these other places, the Eastern European countries and the former Soviet republics, want to be back in the Russian Federation. This isn't really the point of what's happening here. Russia, as I see it, they're not interested in conquering Poland or something like that. I mean, they might be happy if, the Baltic republics weren't part of NATO, but, as long as they mind their own business, I think that's, that they can continue like that. The problem is what's going on in Ukraine. Ukraine is very much a unique situation. And in general, the reason why the Russians, if you kind of looked at it the other way around, NATO has built this kind of machine, including in Ukraine. Ukraine is very specific, but if you look at the former Eastern European countries and the Soviet Socialist republics, the US has built this kind of and NATO, they built kind of a wall in a way that it is, can be a threat to Russia. And if you look at it the other way around, let's say, for example, that China went in with all of its sophisticated weaponry and technology, and they made some kind of mutual defense pact with Colombia or Ecuador or one of these countries, and then eventually more Latin American and Central American countries wanted to be part of this pact. And then all of a sudden, Mexico wanted to be part of this pact. What would the U.S. say? The U.S. would say, no, Mexico, that's too close. You're getting too close. It's enough that China has these friends in other places in Central America and Latin America, but now Mexico, it's too close. And then what if Mexico came into this sphere, into this agreement with China and the rest of the Hispanic world? then Mexico would say, well, we want Texas back. It used to be Mexican. I mean, that you could have that kind of thing, right? And that's kind of the way it is. If you look at it the other way around, I mean, it makes the Russian viewpoint makes more sense. And this is not to be an apologist for anybody, but it's not that I'm not here to defend this one or that one. I'm just saying that certain arguments, if you look at them, if you really examine them, they make more sense than maybe they do to the average person in the West, just looking at them on the surface. But Ukraine is definitely a different situation. And the pity of it is that the two countries are sort of, they really are close in a way. Historically, they are close in a way. I mean, they're like cousins. I mean, they're like Canadians and Americans. They're cousins. I mean, there are some differences, but really, it's Russia, as I see it, they don't want Ukraine, but they don't want to be threatened by Ukraine. And that brings me to the next point: is what is so special about Ukraine? Well, it really has to do with the government they have. It really doesn't have to do with the people. It doesn't have to do with the military, really. I mean, a little bit, but really, it's the people who run the show. And who runs the show? Well, it's a group of people that are basically a neo-Nazi in their ideology, and they really they've established biolabs in the country, and there's money laundering and things happening to children. I mean, there's all kinds of things happening there, and probably in Taiwan as well. That's going to probably be the next one. So that's the issue. I mean, it isn't just protecting the Russian-speaking people and the ethnic Russians in the eastern part of the country. That's part of it. But the reason why the Russians do that is because then it makes it tougher for Ukraine to join NATO, because Ukraine cannot join NATO if they're in the middle of a conflict. So Russia has an interest in going in and the last few years trying to protect these people, because it creates a situation where Ukraine cannot go into NATO, and Russia doesn't want Ukraine to go into NATO. I think if Ukraine agreed to be neutral, that would be okay, and admit that recognize that Crimea is part of Russia, and possibly give independence or some kind of broad autonomy, but probably independence to the two Donbass republics. That would be, I think the fighting would stop, but also getting rid of the government. The government is, it's a neo-Nazi government. Sometimes it's referred to as the KM, the Khazarian Mafia, and the Khazarians are very kind of strange people. They've used Talmudic Judaism to further their aims, and of course if you call them on anything that they're trying to do, any of this money laundering, biolabs, children, what happens to children, if you call them on any of that, then they call you anti-Semitic. But the irony of that is that really they're more pagan, if not Luciferian and satanic. It really isn't, the idea isn't that they're Jewish. They use Talmudic Judaism, they've used it very cleverly over the years. These really aren't the same people that we know as Eastern European or Ashkenazi Jews in the north, or we know them as, the Semitic indigenous, the 12 tribes, or the Sephardic in North Africa. It's not really, this is different. These people are fine, and, love your neighbor and all of that. This is a different group of people that have very cleverly used religion, Talmudic Judaism, to further their aims. But really, it isn't about that. It's about taking over in different countries and establishing this so-called New World Order based on democracy, but it's their view of democracy. And you hear the mainstream media talking about, we're going to lose our democracy, and these radical left politicians, we're going to lose our democracy. Well, what kind of democracy does the New World Order want? They want this type of democracy where the elites rule and other people are enslaved, or even if they're allowed to live, a lot of people will die under this new version of democracy. So anyway, that's a little bit about Ukraine, and I think it's very interesting. I think people should look at biolabs and money laundering and child trafficking and the government itself, which is, there's someone behind the scenes, pulling the strings, who's, from what I've read of him, he's a very bad character named Ihor Kolomoisky, I think his name is Kolomoisky. If you look under, I think it's Kolo Moisky, something like that, Kolomoisky. If you look up him and his relation to Zelensky, I think you'll see basically that Zelensky depends on him pretty much, that he's the one pulling the strings. But all of this, don't believe me. Search it out for yourselves. And the other thing is, Russia has gone in for different reasons. Yes, they have gone in for the ethnic Russians and the Russian-speaking people. They have gone in, I mean, there's, I think, some special documents or something, or some kind of equipment or something that they were looking for in one of the cities. I think Kherson is the name of the city. So they've gone in for different reasons. Now, is it righteous? Well, people are always saying, "Oh, don't believe that Putin has anything to do with being a Christian or being a righteous person or anything like that." Well, the issue is, if people had to be 100% righteous to do something for the kingdom of God, then nobody could do anything really, because we all fall short of the mark sometimes. So the issue is not, this is the past, KGB, thug, killer, whatever. We don't know the future, maybe it's going to get worse. No, it's now. What is God calling people to do? And I think people just have to draw their own conclusions. I mean, it doesn't bother me to say, as a person who believes in God and Christ and the Holy Spirit, I believe in all that. It doesn't bother me to say that someone who maybe in the past hasn't been the most righteous, like me or you or anyone else, somebody who hasn't been the most righteous, maybe now, present moment, they're called to do something that will turn out to be very righteous. No, I don't know. You have to figure that out for yourselves. But the other thing is, this operation that's going on now, and it becomes very political. The UN apparently has forbidden its staff to use the words invasion or war to refer to this operation. And if you use the word operation, then you're supposedly buying into to Russian propaganda or whatever it is. And probably the Russians complained about that. And, fair enough. It's not an invasion in the sense of wanting to take over and become the government of the country. It's not an invasion like that. Aggression does not have really a firm definition in international law. Calling it a war, well, it might be a spiritual war, but I mean, in the sense of human war, it's not like the U.S. goes into countries and they just devastate them and leave nothing, and they don't continue. They break off diplomatic relations, and the Russians do it a little bit differently. Is that they could be waging a war or fighting at the time as they're also trying to conduct negotiations to try to stop it. They can do those two things at once, and in this operation, they're targeting what they want to get rid of. And also these bad guys, they use Ukrainians and Russian Ukrainians as human shields. I was watching on one of the news networks that generally has been pretty good, but they showed a clip of a woman speaking Russian and saying the Russians were shooting at people like this. Well, no, who's shooting at Russian Ukrainians? It's not the Russians, it's someone else, right? But, it doesn't matter. It's true. What do they say? Truth is the first casualty, right, of war? Or whatever you want to call it. And I also heard that within the UN, and I really don't know if this is true, is that there were private discussions among Western countries to take away the veto and permanent status from Russia on the Security Council. Now, it's private, and you can discuss anything you want privately, but if that comes out into the public arena, and especially if it's discussed or adopted, but even if it gets out into a public debate, that could be the end of the United Nations right there. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I know that if the United Nations wanted to get rid of these bad things that I've been discussing, that they could have done it. They have the machinery to do it. They have the human rights machinery to do it. They have the counterterrorism machinery to do it. But they've chosen not to do it. They've chosen not to do it because the UN is controlled, and the Western countries are controlled by the people in the background, with the money. Look at BlackRock and Vanguard, and the people who are in there and have that money. Look at the KM, Khazarian Mafia. So both the UN and the Western countries are controlled by those interests. So they're not going to authorize this type of operation to get rid of, of really what they're doing and what they support. And it's very ironic is that there seems to be among these bad actors, there seems to be this real hatred of Russia and Russians. And okay, Stalin was evil and he did starve Ukrainians in the 1930s. But how did Stalin even see the light of day? Well, people of this same Khazarian ideology went in and they started the Soviet Revolution, which then eventually led to Stalin. So they went in and tried to disrupt or destabilize Russia the same way they're doing it now in Ukraine. And now they're complaining that somebody came along in Russia after they did their thing and killed Ukrainians. So we're just going around in circles, right? So anyway, I think really the UN had a role to play, and they could have done this with the help of Russia and other countries, but they chose not to because they don't. They're controlled by certain interests, and I don't know what's going to happen to the UN. We'll see. But I think anyway, people need to dig beneath the surface and find out really about the biolabs and money laundering, child trafficking, and neo-Nazis and Kolomoisky and Zelensky, this type of thing. And the Russians have been calling for the U.S. to disclose their biolabs in Ukraine. Now, if they're coming out publicly with that, if you look ahead and you play chess, and the Russians do play a lot of chess, but I mean, as far as chess game, they know other things too. It's stages. If they're coming out with this, it's because they know something else that's going to come out. And then what's going to happen with Taiwan? Taiwan, I've heard reports, they have a lot of the same problems that Ukraine has. So, and who's going to go in and clean that up? And if that gets to the Security Council, what happens? What happens then? The Russians just decided that if the UN wasn't going to do anything, they had to do it, and they had to take all of the attacks and everything else, because it's a matter of survival. It's a matter of survival not just for Russia, but beyond. So anyway, these are some of the things that I hope people will be thinking about, and I think that if you are critical of me, that's fine, but just check it out. I mean, instead of saying, well, he's just a nut, maybe I'm a nut, but it really doesn't have anything to do with this discussion, right? It's kind of beside the point of this discussion. As far as this discussion goes, just check out things yourselves and see what your conclusions are. So thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.